part and a little bit about the tech around the same, which can be utilized to develop the smart contracts depending upon the events, which needs to be orchestrated from the point of view of smart contracts. And this can be mimicked for the DAO world, that is de-autonomous or decentralized, rather decentralized autonomous organizations, which are looking into the data set of reviewing the same with the identification of the data set of identifying the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, that is the trips. We discussed about trips, and I'll walk you through the same. So one of the publications is due for this month, and probably as I speak it's being printed, and once I have the details I'll share the link with you so that and review the same and work around it to develop the framework of the protocols, particularly from the standpoint of trade secrets, because contract drafting and the others, they need to be synchronized with the larger aspect of the licensing stuff. However, the daunting question right now is how to license the technological aspects, because there's a difference between know-how and technical know-how. Most of the folks don't even understand this phrase. I would rather say a tagline, which is technical know-how and the know-hows. Putting myself on mute, we'll discuss a couple of things, and then probably I'll try and explain that in detail as much as I can. So putting myself on mute. Okay, first of all, we will try and understand the steps and the methods around the tagging of the learning methods. And for the learning part itself, one of the most important classifications is um, G06N 3/08, that is means and methods for training or learning of the neural networks. And these are training methods or algorithms that sees different subgroups. So if I have to go and look into the details, okay. So I'll walk you through some of the interesting ones, and perhaps I should be writing more on this understanding. Okay, so G06N3/00, that is computing arrangement or module submodules for the biological processes or the biological models. And for the biological models, we need to understand the DNA aspect, that is the ATGC and the like. If we just understand in a bell curve understanding, it would be G06N3/082, that is modifying the architecture, that would be including adding, deleting, silencing nodes or connection. G06N3/084 is back propagation using gradient descent. um, if we are utilizing historical data set, and particularly one aspect of the historical data set can be the evolutionary algorithms. These are G06N3/086, utilizing genetic algorithms or genetic programming. mRNA plays a very vital role, so look into the aspect of the messenger RNAs. Next, we have, one of my favorite, I have been working on it for quite a while now, is G06N3/088, non-supervised learning, that is competitive learning with the available data sets. Then there's G06N3/0895. Now, this is weakly supervised learning, example, semi-supervised or self-supervised learning. However, supervised learning is under the protocol of G06N3/09. Active learning is good enough for different age groups, and it can be utilized to treat ailments like Alzheimer disease and the like. And particularly dementia also can be one part of it. Um, So active learning is G naught 6 and 3 slash 091. Reinforcement learning G naught 6 and 3 slash 092. Adversarial learning G naught 6 and 3 094. Transfer learning. So the prefix remains the same. It's just the nomenclature of the suffix is 096. Distributed learning, federated learning, that is 098. Hyperparameter optimization, meta learning, learning to learn. Oh, interesting. I think I will myself look into this a little bit more in detail. So, this hyperparameter optimization is G naught 6 and 30985. So, it's learning to learn. So, what happens is with learning to learn, understanding is identifying or observing the data, um, and coming out with a new parameter altogether, which is at the first instant itself, the hypothesis was also not part of it. So, it's that powerful. So, you have to look into that data set where it is G naught 6 and 3 slash 0985. That is learning to learn. That's quite interesting. I mean, I always knew about it. It's just that I never deep dive into this understanding. But nevertheless, we are going to do now. Then, when we are trying to understand the mathematical equations, it's always good to understand the equations from the angle point of view, because a slight deviation in the angle can create a effect which itself has a lot of changes. Say, for example, movement of open water. I mean, it's a to a normal mind, it might not sound very intriguing, but it is. So this is G naught 1C13 slash 002. Let's deep dive into this. So even yes, I have worked on this understanding of vertical and horizontal a lot, from renewable aspect of sustainability. So here we are trying to understand G naught 1C13 slash 00. It's the survey process adapted for open water, and open water is referred to as lake, sea, river, or canal. Then there is measurement of movement of open water, which is in vertical movement. That is G naught 1C13 slash 004. And then we have G naught 1C13 slash 006, that is open water horizontal movement. So this is good enough. Okay, let's try and understand what are we trying to achieve. So, okay, acoustic model. So when we talk about the acoustic model, this is the old way of doing stuff. Perhaps when we are trying to assimilate the model data, one needs to understand that um, there has to be a new approach to solve the problem at hand. And right now, the problem statement is to understand the signals of the nature. When I say signals of the nature, is entropy is always increasing. We already talked about it, and there have been Nobel Prize winners around the same. And there's load of data in the online world. However, the point of contention here is we know the entropy is increasing, and perhaps with no more folks or candidates coming online, that entropy, the randomness is much more. Now, to negate the whole impact and getting into the balance of convenience, it is important to understand the equations. And the simpler the equation, the easier it becomes to negate the impact and cause that balance. It is good to work in silos and develop those control points in silos, and then look at the forecast model, and that is going to work. What worked perhaps 10 years, 20 years ago, or something which was done in another parameter altogether, that's not going to work. You cannot copy paste the natural parameters, because at any given point of time, there's a lot of randomness. I mean, I'll just give you one very simple example. In an office itself, if you take the time log of the folks who are in a particular office at any given point of time, there would be situations or events where that X number or Y number of people are there. But at the other end of the spectrum, more people are there, so the randomness increases. So that data set itself has to be negated. So that is something one needs to understand while receiving and processing the data by utilizing the devices, in terms of just noting on the data from the standpoint view of, say for example, when we're talking about the water bodies here, let's take the word water bodies rather than what the nomenclature here has been observed. um, so for creating an ocean forecast model, what is important here to have the temperature of the ocean itself or the water body, then uh, saline, what is the salinity of the parameters around the same, and the data associated. Okay, we have a question. Food that tastes like childhood. Nice. Food that, I don't know, the folks at the other end can see this question or not. Food that tastes like childhood. Uncle chips. So, in India, particularly, there have been instances where a lot of brands have been taken over by others, but uh, over the years, a lot of changes have happened. But okay, let's come back to our discussion about the data assimilation, and particularly understanding the observation characteristics of the same. Um, Let me see. Okay, this is a good data set. Okay, we are trying to understand the uh, observation operators, particularly from the standpoint view of linear interpolation operators. Um, However, one vector is always the observation vector. Then we have the model state, which is kind of a control, and then we have the delta to have the analysis increment over the same. However, if I have to take this equation, I don't want to give this equation right now, but what I would rather uh, put my emphasis here would be to just to understand the input data set. It is important to take the data with different time range parameters. Say, for example, any data parameter. Um, if I have to take the parameter water, so we can go with the pH test also if required. So it would be in different time range. The easiest time range is like 0 to 10, so after every 10 minutes. Um, and at the same point of time, just go into the multiple of the tables. I would rather go with, I would obviate 3 for the moment, because somehow we are negating the Tesla laws, because those were applicable way back, and of course we are trying to negate and get into sustainability. So somehow the electricity part has to be negated again. So loads of hypotheses have to be drawn, and probably I did peer review a few of the publications way back, maybe not way back, but perhaps 2 3 weeks back. So probably I'll talk about those. I think it's in the, once it comes in the public domain, I'll share the details. So this is done. Okay. Okay, this is, I just want to discuss another application, so I'll just do the needful. Okay, so let's look at the business aspect also, because for all the research purposes, businesses support research in many ways. So we need to understand the business aspect of anything and everything, particularly from standpoint view of even sustainability. So for the banking stuff, for calculating, so my one of my favorite thing as a childhood, even before YouTube asked me this question, would be um, the calculative part of when doing any mathematical equation was to calculate the interest. So there's something called as floating interest also. So right now the banking sector is going through a lot of changes, because deployment of blockchain is real in many ways, because the new world order is already set, stating that because the transfer has to happen between two parties without the intervention of the mediator. So banking sector is the mediator. So here we are talking about the banking part, interest calculation, account maintenance, that is G06Q40/02. Financial planning and analysis is G06Q40/06. If I go or deep dive into this, anything interesting? Okay, for the corporate stuff, it is the applicable one would be G06Q40/00, finance, insurance, and the strategies around the same. So many a time, because the new world order is real, um, then what is important here is to understand the prism test, or I would rather say the alliance or the pool of the alliance which is being formed or already formed to ride with the wave of the new world order. So this is something we need to understand. So let me try and deep dive into this in the best possible manner. So if we have to select Southeast Asian countries, particularly from the standpoint view of the finance and the protocols, let's select Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Indonesia. And the easy way out is to understand the categories of maintenance in terms of the growth categories of the businesses which can be run by utilizing the GIs. GI here stands for the geographical indication. So Malaysia has a lot of geographical indication, perhaps as compared to so you will see the sister concerns in places like Thailand. You will see Singapore is obviously artificially created, so that is one reason why the cost increases. The cost of operation increases in Singapore. And in Indonesia, again, it has a lot of GIs to support the understanding of the data sets. Okay, so let me just walk you through this and I'll wrap up with the discussion here, because there is equity financing and the alliance growth. So how that can be understood in the best possible manner. So let's, because there are a lot of anomalies happening right now, can we negate the anomalies? The answer is yes. How? That is something we need to discuss between the stakeholders and the operators as to how to handle the anomalies, because the number of anomalies are increasing because nature is trying to um, bend towards the balance of convenience, which is not easy to achieve, but it is achieving it the way it has to. So let me just try and explain this part. So we are going to talk about liquidity and the leverage relationship. Liquidity and what as a stakeholder you can leverage on. So that is something you need to understand. We need to see the big problem statement here, and the problem statement here is the turmoil of the damage caused and how much damage has been caused and what steps were taken and which never worked out to solve any of the problems. So generally, alliance investment is all about joint ventures, the stakes, the project financing, how the royalty is teamed up, and the value of every stake depends upon a couple of factors. So I'll just dive into those. Say, for example, how much liquidity the alliance itself will need from its investor over time. So one of the problem statement maybe 20 years backwards to get people online for the very first time. Does that problem statement still a problem statement? That's one of the questions which needs to be answered by the stakeholders themselves. What are the repercussions of being online for whatever number of hours? Is the problem statement solved? Again, we need to conduct the SWOT analysis